Mr. Speaker, I rise today to provide an update to the members of the Honorable House and the people of Bermuda on the implementation of the Code of Practice for Project Management and Procurement. In particular, I wish to focus on the work that is being undertaken to implement framework agreements. The Code of Practice for Project Management and Procurement was implemented on July 2, 2018. Accordingly, the Public Service is now taking the necessary steps to implement procurement strategies that leverage the government's purchasing power, maximize efficiencies, and achieve cost savings. To this end, the government is identifying opportunities to aggregate purchasing and negotiate favorable rates. Mr. Speaker, the Code, in accordance with Section 35 Framework Agreements, sets out conditions for the use of the framework agreements by public officers when the government wishes to contract for the provision of goods and services. Mr. Speaker, a framework agreement maximizes economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in procurement. It consolidates the government's buying power and gives public officials the flexibility to order goods and services from private sector suppliers without going through the full tender application process more than once during a defined period. This as opposed to each department or ministry undertaking a tendering process to acquire the same goods and services for the individual's shops. The administrative burden associated with the repetitive tendering processes throughout government has proven time and cost prohibitive and contributes to ongoing inefficiency. Mr. Speaker, when setting up a framework, the government via the Office of Project Management and Procurement will run a full procurement exercise to select suitable suppliers and set terms and prices for a period. The suppliers are awarded a place on the framework agreement, and individual department and ministries will not have to engage in any further tendering for the relevant product or service during the term of the agreement. Mr. Speaker, at present, framework agreements are being developed for the procurement of commodities such as office supplies, uniforms, telecommunication services, and other standard operating products and services. The government will commence the implementation of framework agreements with mobile devices and services. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the Code, several months ago, the Office of Project Management and Procurement used a restricted tendering procurement method to solicit quotations for the provision of a varied menu of mobile services. The objective of the solicitation was to secure fixed and preferential pricing from the carriers. Mr. Speaker, in response to the solicitation, the relevant carriers developed specific packages based upon the service required by the bulk of the government's mobile users. Each service package takes into account cost savings initiatives such as the inclusion of overages in data usage management, a data provision to include free access to the government and officially nominated sites, and the elimination of charges for overages. In order to determine the optimal combination of services and prices as part of the tendering process, carriers were asked to submit their best and final offers. Mr. Speaker, in terms of the framework agreement, Mr. Speaker, the terms of the framework agreement are now being finalized, and it is expected that its use will provide for more efficient and cost-effective purchases of mobile devices and services. The main purpose of this approach is to ensure that consistent and cost-effective rates are applied for the benefit of all government mobile users. Device types will be standardized by bulk purchases or unlocked devices, and device usage will be managed in a further effort to control costs. Mr. Speaker, the government expects that it will have at least 3 framework agreements for various products and services in place by the end of this fiscal year. The advantages of the government using framework agreements include less downtime between identifying a need and fulfilling it, a reduction in administrative costs with the removal of the full procurement process for every requirement, and potential savings with economics of scale in that suppliers may offer competitive prices. Mr. Speaker, suppliers will also benefit from the introduction of framework agreement with the reduction in the administrative burden due to a streamlined procedure for working with the government. Mr. Speaker, framework agreements save time. This is especially true for relatively simple, frequently repeated purchases, such as office supplies. Framework agreements will allow the government to choose suppliers that offer long-term value so as to reduce overall procurement costs and save internal resources. The government will also have certainty as prices are set for the duration of the term of the framework. Mr. Speaker, framework agreements provide for the implementation of processes that promote agility, enabling public officers to react and adapt optimally in a speedy and cost-effective manner, whilst maintaining good government practices. Mr. Speaker, this government will continue to focus on maintaining internal efficiency and effectiveness by implementing processes and policies established to drive accountability of all public officers. Our vision is a future-forward government for the people of Bermuda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.